Shock Monkey Radio is created by adults for entertainment purposes. The views and opinions expressed here do not reflect the sponsors or FXPG Public Radio. For additional information, refer to the U.S. Bill of Rights. Stand warned. So let's get into my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, because I didn't even bother trying to number these because I knew it wasn't going to end up with a pretty number like 13. So these are my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, and so if you can't watch them all, I would suggest you at least watch these episodes of the Twilight Zone because I think they are 100% the best. There's Mr. Denton on Doomsday, which is a town drunk who's getting bullied by Martin Landau and finds a gun, and how his life changes after that. It's a pretty good episode. There's Time Enough at Last. I'm sure it's probably the most famous Twilight Zone episode, Time Enough at Last. Excuse me. Time Enough at Last was Burgess Meredith, where he's a reader. He likes reading, and he gets caught in a vault during an explosion, a nuclear war, and he's left alone, last man on Earth, but he's got a hen-pecking wife at home, won't let him read, and so now he's got all the time in the world to read, and that's probably the most famous Twilight Zone episode. And when the sky was opened was a really good one. I believe. Let me double check this. When the sky was opened, Twilight Zone season 1, episode 11. I just want to double check. Yeah, this is a story about these 3 astronauts who go into space, and something happened to them out in space, and they ended up crash landing, and then they start disappearing one by one. It's creepy. It's really creepy. It's a good one. There's The Four of Us Are Dying, which is an excellent screenplay in terms of production. It must have been super cheap to film that episode, The Four of Us Are Dying. But it's about this guy who has this superpower, right? And the superpower is he can change his face. He can change his face to look like pretty much anybody. And he has this scheme. I guess he's not like a superhero. He's more like a supervillain, using his power to get money, get a hot girl he likes, and stuff like that. And it's a pretty good story. I don't want to spoil too much of this for you if you're going to watch it, but I mean, I think The Four of Us Are Dying is really, really well done. Another great episode is Execution, which is it starts out with a guy being hanged for murder, and a time traveler from the future plucks him out of the noose as he's being hung. And like I said, I don't want to spoil it for you. So definitely, that's a really good story. That's like, if it was in my top 5, that's like a top 5 story. Execution. That's a really good story. The Big Tall Wish is a really excellent story about a boxer named Boldy Jackson. And Boldy Jackson is fighter. Incidentally, it's an all African American cast, which was revolutionary for the era. I think the season 1, it's like 59. They had an all black cast in a Twilight Zone episode, and it's a really good episode about Boldy Jackson, this boxer who has this little kid, a friend of his, of a neighbor, and he's a boxer, and he's going to this fight. And so the kid says, "I'm going to make the big tall wish that you win this." And it's really good story. I mean, it's a really strong script. I mean, and they gave it to people who hadn't, really done a whole lot of work in television before. And it's like, good. That's good. Progressive. Dust. The episode Dust is a pretty good one. It's there's a lot of Western themed shows, Twilight Zone episodes, and that's because it's back in the late 50s, early 60s, Westerns were selling. Everyone's pushing Westerns, even at the studios. Where it's like Rod Serling's going to pitching these people. Was it CBS? I forget. And so he's pitching these people, and they're like, "Yeah, but we need more Westerns because Westerns is what sells." And so. There's a lot of Western themes one, but the episode Dust is really good. It's kind of focused on this wandering merchant. I forget his name, but he sells the rope for the hanging, and he sells because that's what's going on in town. Is a guy is going to be hanged because he ran over a girl in the street when he was drunk on his cart. Ran over a girl in the street, so he's going to be hung for it. Hung for it. Hanged. Let's go with hanged for it. And and then this peddler is going to sell this dust. He wants to sell this magic dust to this guy to help them free his son, help him let it go. This magic dust that turns hate into love. It's a really interesting story. The Invaders. It's I think that's an award-winning episode of Twilight Zone because it's one woman show. It's a one person in the cast and just nothing but set and props. Where this lady in a farmhouse fights off these alien invaders. It's pretty good. It's like a really good story, and like there's no script. It's just all action. They showed and they didn't tell until the very end. Anyway, and so it's a Twilight Zone episode, of course, right until the end. So another great episode is Mr. Dingle the Strong, which is another one starring Burgess Meredith, and I think there's a lot of fun moments and funny moments in Twilight Zone episodes, and I like that they included it in there. And so they had these aliens. They come down. They're trying to find and they're aliens that are invisible around all of us, and they're just moving around and stuff like that. And they're just these two aliens show up, and they want to find a substandard human specimen to run an experiment on. And they find this guy, Mr. Dingle, who's a vacuum cleaner salesman, and so they zapped him with the strength of like 50 men or something like that. And so he goes around like lifting cars and like lifted stuff and breaking stuff, and the aliens like take it away from him. It's really it's a really good story. I don't want to spoil like the turn at the end, but it's a fun episode. And you can kind of see like when episodes like this started showing up on television, where it's just a fantastical like aliens walking around, you can see how the Silver Age comic books came to be, because I'm certain like all those people who were writing comic books or watching TV at night, and it's like anything like the Twilight Zone certainly piqued their interest. Another excellent episode is called Shadow Play, with this guy who's about to be executed for a crime. Yeah, I have all of these in my head. About to be executed, he starts telling people, he's like, this is a dream. This happens every night to me. It's like the dream is me in the courtroom. I get sentenced. I go to the prison. I talk to the lawyer, talk to the district attorney, blah 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 blah, and then it's the same dream, and it ends when I'm executed, and it happens every night. And so it's really really good episode. It's a lot of these episodes were like more like stage plays. I forget that. I think that's what they're called, like stage plays. And sometimes the stage play doesn't translate well when it comes to like television, but a lot of them translated real well because I think of the nature of it, the nature of the content. There's another episode I love called "Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up?" Somebody sights a UFO. A bus stops, and apparently an extra person gets on a bus. Cops are trying to figure out there's somebody in this room must be an alien. So it's kind of a silly, interesting story. A really good episode is called Two. Has Charles Bronson in it, I believe, and it's the aftermath of a war. A big war, and it's like probably nuclear, and so like it's just these two people who are left alive, two combatants from the enemy side. There's Charles Bronson on one side, and this female from another side. And as soon as they start seeing run into each other, they're like fighting and stuff like that. And then they realize they're all alone and stuff like that. And it's really kind of a really heartwarming story. A terrifying story is one called The Good Life, and this is, I think, a very common one. It's about the boy who has godlike powers, and he's a mean. He changes people into monsters, and they'll wish him into the cornfield. I think they did it for the Twilight Zone movie. They remade that, and the Kick the Can one, I think, were remakes in the Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Of course, see, this is all in my head. That was all redone for the Twilight Zone movie. But The Good Life, that's a terrifying one, where the father from the next door neighbor, he's sitting there shouting, it's like, somebody grab a lamp, knock him out while he's focused on me. Oh man, it's so it's so good. I'm sorry, I may have spoiled that one a little bit, but it's great. It's great. I love that. Another one is A Quality of Mercy. I believe that one stars Dean Stockwell of Quantum Leap fame, and he's a new officer coming in like right at the tail end of the war in the Pacific. And he wants to go and wipe out these wounded Japanese soldiers that are holed up in a cave. And he drops his binoculars, and then when he picks them back up, he's all of a sudden in a Japanese uniform. This happens in the Philippines, so it's like 3 years prior and then he's part of a Japanese unit that's trying to wipe out a bunch of American troops that are holed up in the same cave. It's pretty good episode. I'm trying to get through these because I got more. And so another good one is The Last Rites of Jeff Myrtlebank. The Last Rites of Jeff Myrtlebank, where he is, this kid got sick. The doctor thought he was dead, and so they're in the middle of burying him. And in the middle of his funeral, he sits up out of his coffin, going, "Hey, I'm hungry," and everyone starts to think that he is like a zombie or something like that. That's a good one. The 30 Fathom Grave is excellent. I guess I'm partial to it because I was in the Navy, and it's about this story about this I think it was a destroyer in the Guadalcanal region, and a sailor, a chief who 20 years in the Navy kind of guy, lifer. They start hearing this banging coming down. Sonar's picking up this banging coming from underneath the ocean, and this chief is just like freaking out. He just starts freaking out, and you find out that he had been there before at the Battle of Guadalcanal, and it's a 30 Fathom Grave. I don't want to spoil it for you. Anyway, a couple more I want to talk about is Steel. Steel takes place in this alternate future of the 70s where boxing has been outlawed. And so in order to fill the need, they use robots to fight. And it's about this guy, is a handler and a trainer, manager and handler, and they manage the robot, right? But the robot's like falling apart. It's an old model, and stuff like that. And the robot, they've got this contract for a fight for $500, and the robot breaks right before the fight. And so the manager gets the idea. It's like, we'll dress myself up like the robot, and I'll go in there and fight the robot. It's a good episode. If you're a madman like me, if you're like if you have a super villain streak in you, I highly suggest the episode Uncle Simon. If you have a little streak of cruelty in you and you like hurling insults, Uncle Simon is an excellent episode for like people who are mean to each other. I don't know how else to say it. It's like if there's somebody you really hate, it's like Uncle Simon's the episode for you. It's basically about this old guy who's a rich old guy, and he's always doing experiments down in the basement. But he's got this caretaker because he's got a bad hip or something like that, and he walks with a cane. And this caretaker is only taking care of him because she knows she's going to inherit the money and so forth. And so he invents something to give her a hell of a time afterwards. And the last one I want to mention is the Ring-a-Ding Girl, or Ring-a-Ding Girl, I think is the name of it. It's about this actress who, wow, I don't even know how I could tell the story without spoiling it. It's about an actress who comes from the small town, and she shows up in a small town one day to visit them, and she's like, "Oh, I'm all famous and everything. You guys should love me." And they're having like a Founders Day picnic or something like that, and they're going to be at the park. And she's like, "No, I want." She goes down to the TV station. And it's like, "No, I want everyone to come down to the high school. Come down to the high school auditorium. I'm doing my one girl play, so you can go to the picnic if you want, but you can come see me." And everyone's thinking, it's like, "Why are you acting so uppity? Why are you acting like so Hollywood on us?" and so forth. And it's a really heartwarming story. It's really good. Like I said, I don't want to spoil it. Now, real quickly, I'm going to go over like the worst Twilight Zone episodes. So if you want to know which ones to omit, I would recommend not watching these Twilight Zone episodes. The 16mm Shrine. I'm old. How am I going to deal with being old? There's another episode called People Are Alike All Over. Yeah, we like zoos. People like zoos. There's one called A Passage for Trumpet. Dude, quit making out with the trumpet. There's The Trouble with Templeton. It's like, "Oh, I'm growing old. I can't deal with growing old." There's The Mind and the Matter, which is like, "I hate people. Oh, wait, I'm bored." When they're all gone. There's A Game of Pool. And it's like, pool isn't that great. All right, Joe Rogan. All right, Death's Head Revisited is like, who wants to relive all that Holocaust stuff? That's not entertainment. That's a bucket of tears. The Jungle, really? It was like, that was just they laid the burden of the episode on the sound designers. The whole plot is based upon the sound designers in that episode. There's the Showdown of the Rance McGrew, and it's like, "Oh, these cowboy actors aren't real cowboys. Give me a break." It's all pushing westerns again. There's The Fugitive, which is like, dude, that's an old dude hanging around with a little girl. There's a lot of that in those Twilight Zone episodes. Some old dude hanging around little girls. See that quite a bit. And it's nobody says boo to them. What the hell? There's the dummy. And it's like any episode that involves ventriloquism is just awful. There's the last night of a jockey. It's like, I'm sorry, Mickey Rooney. I don't get why he's ever famous. There's a short drink from a certain fountain, which again, I'm old. I don't know how I'm growing old. What do I do about it? And so here's the long morrow. Where this guy owned himself. That's the turn is just like, oh, cell phone. You screwed it up, bro. That's the only good of that episode is that you get to laugh at the end. It's like, dude, what an idiot. How can you be an officer in the military? And Caesar and Me is another episode where involving ventriloquists and schizophrenia. Jeff Dunham, do you think he's schizophrenic? Do you think that's helpful in that kind of career?